Kosovo, Sierra Leone had a special committee chaired by the Foreign Secretary which met a number of times, not defence and overseas policy.
So it didn't mean Afghanistan or Kosovo?
Maybe, I can't remember now. It's a long time since it met, and I've only been to one or two meetings of it, and they were early on. It may have been that Kosovo, I don't think it met on Afghanistan either. But there was a ministerial committee on Afghanistan that started to meet after the military action, and similarly on Iraq. When the military action started, then we had the daily cabinet. But he took reports of what was going on.
What we're getting a picture of here is that the relevant cabinet committee did not consider this in detail, which is what one would expect with detailed papers.
Paper or analysis of the risks, the danger, the military options, the political and diplomatic options, a strategy for the UK.
And not just that
level,
was
never that.
Or at the cabinet level either.
No.
And the decisions were being taken by a very small group of people close to the Prime Minister, none of whom, apart from him, are elected.
Yes, that's...
So there were no ministers involved in that apart from him.
That's right.
Thank you.
Do you know about the role of the Foreign Secretary at this time?
Well, sorry. I mean, the Foreign Secretary then would have a close relationship with the Prime Minister and the entourage, but I think the decisions were being made by the Prime Minister and the entourage, and the Foreign Secretary was helpful.
Was?
Helpful. I mean, it went along with those decisions. But I think the decision-making was sucked out of the Foreign Office, so which I think is a great pity, because there's enormous expertise about the Middle East in the Foreign Office, and certainly the Foreign Office has the expertise to understand what's necessary to achieve a second resolution.
But I haven't understood. You said the Foreign Secretary was helpful. Are you suggesting he was just ancillary and the decisions were made elsewhere?
I'm suggesting he was extremely loyal to the Prime Minister and his decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, please.
We leave Claire Short giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee for almost an hour. If you're watching on digital satellite, you can see the rest of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee session by pressing the red button now. With me is our diplomatic editor, Brian Hanrahan, who's been listening all morning to Robin Cook and to Claire Short, both giving fascinating insights into the workings of government in the run-up to the war.
I don't think we've seen anything quite like this before. These are two people who were sitting at the cabinet table during the run-up to one of the most critical decisions taken in recent years. They are now out in the open talking very frankly about what they said, what they did, and how the decisions were made. And they've both made serious charges. Robin Cook has effectively said there was a great deal of wrong evidence coming from the intelligence community, that the evidence, most of it, he says, was wrong, that was presented forward, and he wants to know why it was wrong and whether or not there was other evidence that contradicted it, and if so, how come nobody got to see it. Claire Short is making a much wider challenge to the government. She's saying that effectively there was an abandonment, she said, of the normal decision-making procedures. There were no papers, there were no analyses, there was no meeting of the Specialised Defence and Foreign Affairs Committee, which should examine these major issues, and the whole thing was effectively run, she says, by Number 10 and Tony Blair.
And they both agree that the decision to go to war was made well before the war, and according to Claire Short, between Bush and Blair, sometime in the summer. And then, as war approached, they were looking for evidence to support the case to go to war.
Well, that's, I mean, Claire Short's view all along now has been that this was effectively a rigged decision, and that Tony Blair misled her, she said. I mean, half-truths, exaggerations to get us into a war by the spring. And she feels, as you can see there, quite bitter about what she thinks was that she was let down, even though she was given an immense amount of personal attention by Tony Blair and by the intelligence community in order to try and keep her on board. Robin Cook is not saying quite so much. He's saying that he thinks the Prime Minister actually behaved quite honourably. If anything, it was his starry-eyed conviction. I can't remember the exact phrase he used.
The severity, I think he said, of the conviction.
It was the conviction which led him to effectively adjust the intelligence to suit the conclusions. And you can hear Robin Cook sitting there casting a very jaundiced view over this intelligence, saying, when I was Foreign Secretary, it didn't support this conclusion. I don't see why it supports it now, and I'm not sure why it's being presented in this fashion. That scathing comment from Claire Short that it was the House style of Downing Street to produce shoddy dossiers with not really enough information and considerably messed about.
Yet, to be fair to the government, Robin Cook did make it clear that it was the #1 topic, as you would expect of conversation in Cabinet, as the country drifted towards war.
There is a clear distinction there between, I think, Robin Cook, who is saying that Tony Blair gave every opportunity for people to talk about it in Cabinet, to make their point, and that he doesn't believe that Tony Blair was in any way duplicitous in what he did. Claire Short taking a very different viewpoint, effectively saying that there should have been analysis, preparation, there's a mechanism which these things should follow. You can't just sit in the Cabinet and ask people to shoot their mouths off and hope they get it right.
Brian, thanks very much.
A lot more analysis of all of that coming up at midday, but we'll just break away for a few moments for a weather update with Alex Deakin.
Hello again. We've already had some pretty heavy showers so far today, and I wouldn't be surprised before the day is out if we didn't have 1 or 2 more with even a rumble of thunder, particularly in eastern areas.
In each of 11 countries of all different sizes and views, Canada and the USA itself in North America, Brazil in South America, Britain and France in Europe, plus Russia, Israel and Jordan in the Middle East, 2 other Asian countries, South Korea and Indonesia, and Australia. We tried hard to include Africa, but found it technically impossible to arrange. So it's very important to say this is a wide spread of world opinion, but it is not a fully representative sample of everybody in the world. That's simply unachievable. Overall, then, of all the 10,000 people we spoke to outside the USA itself, exactly half say they feel favourably about the United States, and 40% say they're unfavourable. The remaining 10% don't feel one way or the other. So, of those who take a clear view, there is a 10% overall majority in favour of the US. But that conceals huge differences from country to country. First, the ones where the majority is favourable. Now, Canada is the most positive, with 65% more in favour than against the USA. Then the UK, where the majority of those in favour is 57%, Israel, Australia, South Korea and Russia. And now, those where the majority of people are unfavourable, starting with France, where 10% more people are against than for the USA, with growing unhappiness, as you can see there, in Indonesia, Brazil, and most of all, Jordan. Jordanians deeply upset by America's policy on Iraq and the Israel-Palestine issue. So, what are people's feelings about President Bush? Well, here the message outside the US is much more negative. In Israel and just in Canada, there are more people for George Bush than against him. Everywhere else, the president takes a plunge, including in Britain, where 12% more people disapprove than approve of him. Again, Jordan gives him the biggest thumbs down by a huge majority. Still, maybe this shouldn't worry the president about being re-elected. At home, 43% more people are favourable about him than unfavourable. But outside the USA, the overwhelming message of this poll is pretty negative. Asked about the American invasion of Iraq, 59% overall reckon the USA was wrong to invade, and huge numbers are against the war in countries like Indonesia, Russia and Jordan, as we'll see in detail later. Asked if the USA makes the world safer, 52% say no, it's more dangerous. And when we asked people in those 10 other countries whether they'd like to live in the USA, nearly 4/5 said no, they wouldn't. In spite of that, though, they do want their countries to aspire to some of the things the US has achieved, as we'll see. And high on that list is what they see as America's success in providing economic opportunities for its people. 56%, that's all over the world, all over our world, say they want to see that achieved in their country, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Peter. There's a very interesting quote by one of the commentators which seems to sum up a lot of the ambivalence towards America shown in that polling. Joseph Joffe said, "America is both menace and seducer, both monster and model." Maletsi Makabe, what do you make of that?
Well, I think that's a very dramatic presentation of America. I would put it in a much softer way. Yes, there is a feeling of threat for most people when they look at America. But for many people, there's a feeling of closeness. For example, for us in South Africa, we've received a lot of help from the Americans in our struggle against apartheid. So America doesn't look menacing to us. If anything, its power looks like it was used for our benefit.
So a benign example of American power. Jack Lang, how much do you think that the hostility to America at the moment, that was shown in that poll, is really about President Bush and Iraq?
Remember, on September 11th, we all shared in the world the title of the newspaper Le Monde, we are all Americans, because we all share the same values of freedom, close to many American presidents, from President Wilson till President Clinton. We share this view, this general view of international relations. But it's true, with President Bush, America has a problem with itself. Bush administration has created a feeling in the world which is today negative, probably because of this lack of respect of international law, probably also a little of arrogance, and we, French and British, France and UK, we were in the past colonialists and imperialists, and we know what is the cost of arrogance.
And now, of course, Le Monde says we are all anti-Americans. Bob Kagan, do you think there's been a radical shift in American attitudes to the world with the Bush presidency?
Not as dramatic as people seem to think. A colleague of Mr. Lang's in the 1990s referred to the United States as the hyperpower, and we were talking about the Clinton administration in those days. I think we've had a gap that has opened up, particularly between old allies in the United States and Europe since the end of the Cold War. I think the disappearance of the Soviet Union, leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower, Europe not feeling threatened anymore and therefore not needing America's protection or not feeling that it needs it, has led to a whole different psychology as Europeans look at America.
Of course, one of the questions all around the world, not simply for Europeans, is how much the rest of us know about America, Benazir Bhutto. I mean, we consume American products, and we know about American brands, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and all the rest of it, and we see American armies when we turn on the television. But we don't have a deep knowledge of America, do we?
That's right. People love American goods. They flock to McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Nike shoes. And yet at the same time, when people admire America for its freedom, its openness, its pluralism, they're surprised that why such